All right, so we've got a stack of excerpts here all about Fyodor Dostoyevsky.
Yeah.
Heavy stuff, but I'm actually pretty excited to dig into this with you.
Yeah.
His work is
incredible.
It's intense.
Yeah.
But his exploration of the human condition, it's
so
fascinating.
Deep. So really,
so even if someone listening has never read Dostoyevsky,
right?
I think they're in for a treat.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just to start, just thinking about the guy's life, Dostoyevsky's own life. I mean, it reads like a novel.
Oh yeah.
He was arrested, faced a mock execution.
Can you imagine?
And then ultimately exiled to Siberia. I mean,
oh wow.
Talk about intense experiences.
Yeah.
You can feel those experiences in his writing.
Totally. The presentation mentions this moment.
Yeah.
It's almost cinematic, right?
It is.
He's awaiting execution. Right. And he's staring at this church spire, and it's shimmering in the sunlight.
Uh-huh.
And he even says something like he felt like he merged with the light.
It's wild. That anecdote, I think, really gets to the heart of who Dostoyevsky is. As a writer, I mean, this incredible juxtaposition of beauty and despair, hope and darkness. And that tension between light and shadow, I think that's something that really defines his work.
Yeah.
It's not just about suffering.
Right.
It's about searching for meaning in the face of, the abyss.
It's interesting, too, because, he wasn't writing in a vacuum.
Right.
The presentation mentions that, at the time, atheism and nihilism were gaining traction.
Mm-hmm.
People were really starting to question, traditional belief systems.
Right.
And there was this growing sense that, okay, well, science and technology are going to provide the answers, right?
Yeah.
Almost like we could engineer happiness.
Yeah, technology will solve all our problems.
Right.
It's interesting, though, because, there was this sense that the old sort of traditional belief systems, they were crumbling. Yeah. And with them, the moral framework that they provided.
Right.
So it really begs the question, right? If there is no God, then what then?
Right.
What does it mean to be human in a world stripped of any kind of inherent meaning?
Yeah.
And I think these are questions that haunted Dostoyevsky, and frankly, they still resonate with us.
Oh, absolutely.
Totally.
And you know what? It seems like Dostoyevsky wasn't convinced by that whole material progress equals happiness thing.
Right.
The presentation quotes him saying, man is a strange animal. He wants to be happy, but ends up being miserable. Mm-hmm. It's like we're hardwired to chase happiness, but we often just create our own misery.
Absolutely. And I think Dostoyevsky, he saw this inherent tension in human nature, almost like a self-destructive tendency to sabotage our own happiness.
Mm. And that tension, it plays out, I think, so well.
It does.
In his characters.
Yeah.
They're so richly drawn and just...
they're so complex.
Psychologically complex.
Yeah. The presentation spends a lot of time on this idea of the divided self.
Yeah.
Especially, using Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment as an example.
Right.
And it even points out that his name, Raskolnikov, literally means split or schism.
Yeah.
It's like his name itself is foreshadowing this inner conflict.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I think it goes even deeper than that when you think about the context Dostoyevsky was writing in.
Yeah.
This is a time when nihilism is on the rise. Mm-hmm. You've got Nietzsche proclaiming God is dead.
Right.
And traditional morality is being questioned at every turn. Mm-hmm. And so you've got this character, Raskolnikov, who is trying to forge his own path. Right? He's convinced he's this extraordinary man.
Who can operate outside of conventional morality.
Yeah. And so he commits murder. Right.
He does.
Justifying it.
Yeah.
In his mind as a means to a greater good. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, he's totally consumed by guilt.
Yes.
And psychological torment.
Yeah.
It's like his intellect, his attempts to rationalize, his actions just totally backfire.
They do.
And he's left fractured and broken.
It's a stark illustration of what happens when we try to elevate ourselves above, the universal moral order.
Yeah.
When we start to believe that we can create our own rules.
And succumb to this illusion of our own exceptionalism.
It's that hubris that ultimately leads to Raskolnikov's downfall.
So we've got this character whose name literally means split.
Yeah.
Existing in this world
where
the very foundations of morality are crumbling. It's like If Raskolnikov is a product of his time, what does that say about our own?
It's a fascinating question.
It is.
And one I think we need to explore further.
Yeah.
But before we do, maybe we should shift gears a little bit and talk about another of Dostoyevsky's, I think, most compelling characters. The underground man.
Yeah, the presentation describes him as one of Dostoyevsky's darkest creations.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they paint this picture of him as this isolated, spiteful figure consumed by self-destruction.
Yeah.
Definitely not someone you'd want to invite to a dinner party.
Not a fun guy.
No.
But I think his darkness is part of what makes him so compelling as a character. I mean, he embodies this sense of alienation and really existential angst.
Yeah.
He's hyper-aware.
Oh, yeah.
Overthinking everything, trapped in this labyrinth of his own mind.
I love that the presentation uses the term hyperconsciousness.
Yeah.
Because it's such a perfect way to describe him. He's paralyzed by his own thoughts.
Yeah.
Unable to act.
Totally.
It's like his intellect is working against him.
He is a prisoner in the solitary confinement of his own mind.
Right.
And in a way, he represents this shadow side of the Enlightenment, right? The dark potential of reason when it becomes completely detached from empathy, compassion, and a sense of something larger than himself.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because both Raskolnikov and the underground man, in their own ways, they seem to represent these potential pitfalls of intellect.
It's true.
The dangers of relying solely on reason.
Right.
Without a moral compass.
You've got it. That's a really insightful observation.
Okay.
And it leads to a crucial question, I think, that Dostoyevsky is grappling with in his work.
All right.
If reason alone isn't the answer,
then what is?
Right.
What can guide us through this existential maze?
Yeah.
What can reunite the fragmented self?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
And I have a feeling Dostoyevsky might have a few thoughts on that.
He does, and that's where things get really interesting. Yeah. But I think we should probably save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So we've talked about, how Dostoyevsky wasn't afraid to explore the darker aspects of human nature.
Yeah.
But even in those dark landscapes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's this glimmer of hope, this suggestion that maybe, just maybe, there's a way out of the maze.
It's subtle, but it's there.
Right.
And the presentation actually mentions this concept of religar, which means to
bind or reconnect.
To bind or reconnect,
And it's through this concept that Dostoyevsky explores.
I think so.
This idea of wholeness, right? Yeah.
Of piecing together the shattered fragments of the self.
Right. It's not about rejecting reason altogether. It's more about recognizing that reason alone isn't enough.
It's not the whole picture.
We need something more to anchor us.
Right.
To give us that sense of purpose and connection beyond just the purely intellectual.
So think about Raskolnikov and the underground man.
Okay, yeah.
They're both profoundly isolated.
Right.
They're in these echo chambers of their own minds.
Yeah.
Cut off from any real sense of belonging or
meaning. Yes. Beyond themselves.
But Dostoyevsky seems to be suggesting that there's a way to bridge that gap.
There is. There is.
The presentation talks about the importance of faith.
Right.
But it's not like a simple prescription, is it?
No, not at all.
There's more to it.
It's much more nuanced. I mean, Dostoyevsky himself was a devout Orthodox Christian, but his faith wasn't blind or unquestioning. He grappled with it. He wrestled with doubt.
Yeah.
And I think he explores those complexities of belief through his characters.
Right. So it's not about, forcing a particular dogma.
Right.
It's more about exploring the potential of faith.
Yeah.
Or maybe even it's the act of surrendering to something larger than oneself.
You got it. It's about recognizing that we're not these self-sufficient islands. We're all part of this larger tapestry, woven together by these threads of shared humanity, shared experiences, shared suffering even.
Yeah, and that brings us to love, right? And compassion.
Yeah.
Because the presentation talks about how even with all the darkness in Dostoyevsky's work, there's this underlying belief in the power of love.
I think so.
To redeem, to heal, to reconnect. It's like this force that breaks through the walls we build around ourselves.
Yeah, love acts as a counterpoint to the isolation.
Right.
And despair that a lot of his characters experience.
It reminds us we're not alone.
Yeah, and it's not always romantic love.
Right.
I mean, it can be the love between siblings, the love of a parent for a child.
Right.
Even the love for humanity as a whole.
And it's interesting because even in like his most flawed characters, like Raskolnikov or the Underground Man, we see these glimmers of that capacity for love.
It might be buried underneath layers of cynicism or self-loathing.
Right.
But it's there.
So even in the darkest corners of the human psyche, there's this potential.
There is.
For redemption, for transformation.
Exactly.
It's almost like Dostoyevsky is saying, look, we're never truly lost. There's always a possibility of finding our way back to the light.
And that brings us back to Religat, to the idea of reuniting the fragmented self.
Right.
And it's not a one-time event.
Right. It's not a sudden epiphany.
No, it's the process.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
Right.
A constant striving.
It makes me think about how we talk about mental health and well-being today. The presentation even draws this parallel between Religat and modern psychology. Yeah. Like self-transcendence.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Finding meaning and purpose.
It's about recognizing that we're not just these individuals striving for personal happiness. Yeah. We're interconnected. Yeah. We're part of a larger web of life. Yeah. And when we lose sight of that, when we become too focused on just our own needs and desires.
Right. We start to unravel.
Yeah. That's when we start to unravel. And, it's especially relevant today.
It is.
Wouldn't you say? I mean, we live in a world that often feels
fragmented,
divided,
hyper-individualistic.
Dostoyevsky was writing back in the 19th century. Yeah. But his insights feel eerily prescient. Yeah. Like he anticipated this potential for societal breakdown. Yeah. For this erosion of shared values. Yeah. And a common understanding
of reality.
Yeah.
And the presentation brings up Raskolnikov's dream of the virus. That makes people believe they're the sole possessors of the truth. Yeah. It's kind of chilling how much that resonates with what we see happening today. With the spread of misinformation, polarization of opinions.
It's like he was warning us about the dangers of losing our ability to connect, to empathize, to find common ground when we become these islands unto ourselves, convinced of our own righteousness. Yeah. That's when the fabric of society starts to tear.
The presentation even quotes Dostoyevsky as saying, without God, everything is permitted. It's a stark statement.
It is.
And, there are a lot of ways to interpret that.
Right.
But I think it points to the need.
I think so.
For some kind of moral framework. Yeah. Some sense of accountability beyond our own subjective desires.
Because when we lose sight of a shared moral compass, when we reject any notion of objective truth or shared values, then it becomes a free-for-all. Yeah. A battle of individual wills where power and self-interest reign supreme. And that is a recipe for chaos and destruction.
So what can we learn from Dostoyevsky about navigating this increasingly complex and fragmented world? Right. Is there a way to resist this descent into chaos?
Well, I think one key takeaway is the importance of humility. So many of his characters suffer because of their pride. Yeah. Their belief that they are above conventional morality. Right. That they can create their own rules.
Yeah. Pride comes before the fall.
Exactly.
Dostoyevsky seems to be suggesting that true wisdom comes from recognizing our limitations, our interconnectedness,
our need for something greater than ourselves.
That's about recognizing that we're not infallible, that we need each other, that we're all in this together.
We are.
And maybe, just maybe, that's where the hope lies.
Maybe it is.
It's a challenging message, but also strangely comforting.
It is.
It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we're not alone.
We're not. We're not. And even amidst the chaos,
there's
always possibility of redemption.
Of reconnection.
Right.
Of finding meaning and purpose.
We've been talking about, like, some seriously deep stuff here.
Sure.
You know, the divided self, the dangers of just relying on your intellect.
Yeah.
But I have to say, you know, what really got me from all this is this idea that Dostoyevsky was almost, like, prophetic.
Interesting.
That he saw this darkness on the horizon, something about human nature.
Yeah.
And the direction society was heading in.
I mean, it's a haunting thought.
It is.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
The presentation quotes Dostoyevsky as saying, "Man loves to create and build, but also loves chaos and destruction." And you think back on the 20th century, I mean, my gosh.
Yeah.
The wars, the genocides.
The violence.
The senseless violence.
Yeah.
It's hard not to think that he might have been onto something.
It really makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
If there's this self-destructive impulse inside all of us.
Yeah.
Like this drive to tear down what we've built.
Almost like we're testing the limits of free will or something.
Pushing it to the edge.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where, you know, Dostoyevsky's idea that without God, everything is permitted becomes so unsettling. It's not necessarily a religious argument, I think, but it's more...
It's about morality.
It's a recognition that without some kind of moral framework, without some sense of accountability, that's beyond just our own desires, we can very easily lose our way.
Is it just part of being human? Are we doomed to keep repeating these cycles of creation and destruction?
Right.
Is there any way to break free from this pattern?
Well, you know, Dostoyevsky really wrestled with these questions, and he didn't give us any easy answers, but he did point towards a possible path forward.
Right.
You know, remember his emphasis on faith, love, and compassion? Maybe he saw those qualities as antidotes to our darker impulses.
Okay.
Like forces that could guide us back from the brink.
So maybe it's not inevitable then.
Maybe not.
Maybe we have a choice.
Right.
We can choose to create instead of destroy.
Yeah.
Connect instead of isolate. Love instead of hate.
I think that's the heart of Dostoyevsky's message. He forces us to confront the full spectrum of human nature, good and bad.
Right, the sublime and the depraved.
The saintly and the monstrous.
Yeah, and then he asks us,
what will you choose?
What will we choose?
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It is.
A provocation. But ultimately, a call to action.
Yeah, I think so. To choose hope over despair.
Yeah.
Love over hate.
Meaning over nihilism.
Because what we've seen here in these presentations is that Dostoyevsky believed that the human spirit is capable of amazing things, but it's also capable of terrible things.
Right. The choice.
The choice is ours.
Is ours.
Yeah.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
And I think it speaks to why, you know, Dostoyevsky's work still feels so relevant.
It does.
He doesn't shy away from the darkness.
No.
But he also reminds us that we're capable of good.
Right.
Of redemption.
Of transcendence even.
Yeah.
He's asking us to look into the abyss.
Yeah.
To really confront the complexities of our own hearts and minds.
And in doing so, maybe become more conscious, more compassionate.
Just human.
More human. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Into the world of Dostoyevsky. I know I've got a lot to think about.
Me too.
And I imagine our listeners do too.
The presentation left us with a really powerful quote. Man loves to create and build, but also loves chaos and destruction. What does that say about the human condition today? Think about it as you explore Dostoyevsky's work. It might lead you to some unexpected places.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking meaning in the world around you.